Alright guys, HyDra back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. OpTic Texas have 1 win, 1 defeat so far in their 2 qualifying matches they played in week 1 of the new CDL season, but they're 0-3 in Search and Destroys and 0-3 so far in round 11s themselves. Lots of questions that when they play top teams, that potentially could come back to bite them, and there's been lots of thoughts from the likes of aBeZy and others that maybe it's Karma's job as the coach of this team to actually figure out a solution to their Search and Destroy problems. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. First of all, I thought this was pretty cool from the Esports Awards, guys. It was confirmed that obviously Dan Gaskin won the Esports Colorcaster of the Year. Chance was number 2 in this, so very close. I know that Miles won play-by-play caster before, so I'm hoping that Chance gets a win at some point. He was runner-up this season, so maybe next year he can go one better. This as well from JoeDeceives. I thought this was pretty funny, and I do wonder what the future is of this whole ATS, well, single tap, snaking, drama potentially on the gentleman's agreement side. Here's Ghosty posing with his automatic, you can actually just kind of see it, automatic tactical sprint settings here enabled on the left hand side. So of course this is going to be a joke, but we do know that it's difficult for the pros to really determine whether players are using single tap to sprint or single tap to tac sprint, whatever you want to call it, or automatic tactical sprint, or they're just using, you know, double tap to tactical sprint. It's difficult for the pros to figure out because some people have cracked movements. Sometimes people look at another player and they think, oh, that guy's using single tap, oh, that guy's using ATS, but he actually isn't. And this is where that eventually, my opinion is that the snaking GA might be upheld. There's going to be some drama on it, but that might be upheld. However, the single tap to sprint GA, maybe even the automatic tap sprint GA, I don't know if that's possible to be upheld, because all it takes is for one guy to think that somebody else is using single tap, he then puts it on, then they think that they're using it, but they say, oh no, I'm not using it, because you can't tell, you can't fully know. So I think that that one specifically, I think is going to descend into chaos, and maybe Ghosty's getting ready for that eventuality. This is also pretty cool. Top Modern Warfare 3 streamers of the last month, of course, Scump is up in, Nature is actually, you know, 4th place, then Zoomer. Shotzzy's the only player that's actually a current pro to make this list, which is pretty impressive, and of course has pretty much the least stream time on here, which isn't a surprise because Shotzzy's got other things he's got to be getting on with, including playing well as he did definitely this weekend. As I said yesterday, Shotzzy would have been, if I had to choose 2 SMGs, 2 ARs, I think Shotzzy would have possibly been alongside Simp in my team of the week. In terms of MVP for OpTic this weekend, I'd probably have said Kenny, because I think he was really valuable in their first series. Okay, the second series didn't have to do that much, but I just think Kenny's such a great piece that this OpTic team needs, and I imagine that if Kenny can work really well with Karma from like a leadership perspective on their Search and Destroy, they can take another step. And as Crimsic says, you know, he was calling it that Kenny would be a massively important factor this year. But they played 2 games this weekend. Their respawn was very good. Okay, map 1 against Subliners wasn't so pretty, but outside of that, they won every respawn they played. They won 3 against Rocker. None of them were really that close, to be honest. It always felt like OpTic had a handle on it. They've just got so much firepower at this OpTic team that in the respawns, they're just going to be such a difficult team to take down. And only, I think, you know, New York and FaZe and Ultra really are going to have a chance of getting the better of them in the respawns this season. It's the Search and Destroy, however, where more questions are raised. In the early part of the season, there's usually a couple of teams that are a bit ahead of the game in Search and Destroy. Well, to be honest, I thought I was seeing that with Vegas, but then we saw what happened Game 5 against Carolina. But Seattle as well, they're looking good. And OpTic play Seattle this weekend. We'll see that in a second, which is very exciting. But they played 3 Search and Destroys. They lost 3 round 11s in those Search and Destroys. So it's not exactly the end of the world. They're not getting blown out in Search and Destroy. But still, they played 2 series and they lost all the searches. And when it came to trying to ice up in round 11s, it just wasn't happening and there were mistakes made. Now, can they, you know, they're a terrible Search and Destroy team? No, they still won all of the respective rounds. They take New York Subliners to a round 11 twice in a row on map 2 and map 5. But they did lose them, and of course that's raising questions. From the OpTic side, I think it's great they've got something to work on. If they came into this week and they beat New York round 5 or game 5 and then they 3-0'd Rocker, they'd probably think, oh, brilliant, we're as good as FaZe. And they're probably not right now. FaZe seem to have got the respawn sorted out, but they've also got the Search and Destroy down, and there's work for OpTic to do on that. So the question that was raised on the reverse sweep really was, well, is their current Search and Destroy level going to be good enough, as Marky B says, when it comes to playing a team like FaZe or Ultra? They seem to be, as it stands, slightly more well-rounded than OpTic. They might be similar in strength right now in the respawn modes, but in Search and Destroy, it does feel like FaZe and Ultra have made less mistakes, really, shall we say. say, than OpTic have this past weekend. Very early days, of course, but theoretically, you get to a major grand finals, you're playing a map 5 search and destroy, the S&D is going to be key in those scenarios. You can't afford to make the mistakes that OpTic have done this past weekend. So it's a problem to solve. It's one of the key things that OpTic will have to work on going forwards. And as Ake says, well, they've got Coach Karma now. Surely he's got to get involved in fixing these issues.
OpTic Gaming, man, or OpTic Texas. I mean, we saw them bring that game back all the way up into a reverse sweep. We obviously all thought that whenever they down 2-0, that it was pretty much game over. They did show a little bit of resilience. We saw some life out of their sub players, but then that game 5, man, like I said earlier in the show, it's just giving me those OpTic Texas MW2 vibes, man, where they just scam. They throw so many situations away because they lack so much discipline. We are very nitpicky on the flank with some of their plays, specifically that round round 10 was it, where they got the 2 first bloods and they were pretty much in a position to win it. Players were all overexposed and they still somehow ended up losing it. So what are your guys' thoughts on OpTic Texas so far?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that the S&D for me is obviously the biggest concern. I mean, you look at their team on paper, I think that they're very much a team that's built to be strong on respawn. But if you look at them from an S&D perspective, they also have a lot of flaws there. So I think for me, that is always going to be a concern throughout this season. I think that that's going to be the difference between the likes of them and Ultra and FaZe is going to be that S&D, because they're good across the board. And I think that that's going to be something that they really need to focus in on and put a lot of time into.
It just looks like they make the game so much harder on themselves than they have to. Like, just honestly, I really think they should just play at Pred's pace. No, literally, like, I feel like Pred's a slower sub, and I feel like he was the one who made some of those ego chow mistakes that I saw. So it's like, I feel like they should just let Pred be the person that this team plays around, instead of Pred trying to play at Shotzzy's pace, because I think it's just gonna, do they have the talent to do that? Sure, but in my opinion, it's just an inconsistent way to play. And dude, in the moment, like, if your habit is to just always make this unnecessary chow, like, you're just taking a 50-50 that's so unnecessary. This team has so much skill this year that it's just like, slow it down a bit. Like, in every game mode, they should hit the drawing board on just their play style as a whole, and maybe there's tempo that they play at.
I don't know if that's ever going to change, man. I don't know if that's ever going to change.
I can't imagine, though, Damon is, full-time coaching these guys, and, like, knowing Damon, like, he's not very vocal about it, but I can't imagine that he's not watching some of the shit he's seeing and not losing full. So it's
I felt so bad for Damon, because whenever that clutch happened, I think there was like multiple people in the chat. It's like, what is Damon teaching them over there or something like that? I'm like, you can't really put this on him and him alone, bro. It's kind of embarrassing, but I feel like
he's probably losing full in some of these situations, and it's like,
would be.
They just, I hope he vocalizes it, because I think he would be a major asset by letting these guys know that they don't have to make the game so hard.
So we did see just a couple of crucial errors at certain moments. I thought Akes' opinion, he's obviously like a very different character on the reverse sweep than he is on the flank a lot of the time, but his thoughts on how Pred and Shotzzy play, because in the respawns they seem to kind of have it down, especially against Rocker. It's pretty spectacular the way both of them played. But in Search and Destroy, maybe there is an argument to say play like Pred, not like Shotzzy, because if Pred tries to play like Shotzzy and support Shotzzy, he might, go a bit too rogue himself, as he did, especially on that map 5 terminal. Now, Shotzzy in general had a great series here. Shotzzy was 11-6, actually, the final map of the series. Okay, maybe he made an error or two, but without Shotzzy, they weren't really even too close to winning that map 5. But it was Pred, who's been ridiculously good in Search and Destroy last year, who is now, I think in the respawns, Shotzzy and Pred seem to be getting there. But in Search and Destroy, they've kind of done the same thing for their respective teams the last couple of years. Pred plays in a different way to Shotzzy does, but they've both been the first blood demon for their respective teams. And now they've got to figure out how that works together. And I think that's kind of affecting them in situations where they might get a life advantage and then they don't really know what to do next. This is probably the key issue for OpTic to focus on in the near future, because, if they can win, let's say, 65% of their Search and Destroy rounds, or just 60% of their Search and Destroy rounds, they're going to be in a phenomenal spot this season. And Karma obviously knows a thing or two about how to do exactly that. So it's going to be interesting to determine how this goes, because last year, Karma wasn't there for the majority of the season. He comes in right at the end, doesn't really want to affect things too much. Of course, 3-time world champion, the only one to still ever do it, all in a LAN environment. That might change with Simp, aBeZy, whatever. We'll see what happens over the coming years, I guess. But at the end of the season, Karma comes in. They don't have a good result in Toronto. They don't have a good result at the World Championship. Toronto, of course, Major 5 last season. So Karma, some people putting the blame on Karma, that doesn't really make any sense, right? A lot of their issues were stemming from further back than then, and Karma, okay, he came in to kind of coach the team, but he didn't really want to affect things too much. They were going pretty well going into that Major 5 Toronto tournament, and then things kind of collapsed. But this season, there is, you know, if they don't perform, especially in certain game modes, there will be questions asked about, all right, what is Karma actually doing about these problems? Because we've seen last season that, and even the season before, you get these mistakes from OpTic. They find themselves in a clutch scenario, or let's say they're up 5-3 in a search and destroy. That was the classic thing that OpTic were up 5-3. They probably ego chat a bit too much in the round 10, and all of a sudden it's, you know, it's round 11, and they might potentially lose. Even the way they lost at Champs last year, Sib clutched that 1v3 against them, right, on that Mikado to lose the series. It's like, come on, these are the types of things that you can't allow to happen. And so far in Search and Destroy this year, we've seen glimpses of similar errors creeping in. So I think there are definitely some thoughts towards Karma that are like, all right, let's fix those issues, let's figure out how to make it work, because Karma knows a thing or two about how to do that. And of course, we've got JP over there as well, doing the stats and running the numbers to figure out exactly what needs to change. And I mean, look, you don't want to stop Shotzzy doing stuff like this. Yes, he gets kind of spun on by this guy here, but I mean, this is one of the craziest things I've actually ever seen. TikToxy is back in full force right here. To be honest, we've seen a lot of people, right? They go up the crane, they no-scope off this. But I've never seen anybody do this. Jumping off the top ropes and 316 someone with a rival. He hits like, what, 5, 6, 7 bullets there, whatever, to kill that guy? Like, this is more impressive than, like, any trick shot that I've really ever seen. To hit all these shots is actually insanely impressive of Shotzzy. But a lot of people are going to see this clip and think, like, this is what this guy is trying to do all the time when they play SnD matches against the pro teams. He's got the talent to do it, but it's not always the optimal strategy, although he was very impactful, I thought, this weekend for OpTic. So I think that's the key issue. And we're going to see whether they've taken steps forward on that when they play Surge this weekend. There's 2 series they play. They play Surge, they play Ravens. So a 1-in-1 week is fine, but ideally for OpTic a 2-0 week. They move to 3-in-1. They'll be feeling very comfortable at that point. This is the schedule, by the way. We'll talk about some of the more interesting matches later on this week, because there are some pretty spicy ones in here. Surge have a very interesting week, by the way. But for the OpTic side, Seattle is such a great game to happen on the Friday evening when they play up against, of course, well, it's the OpTic curse, right? It's Illy, it's Rambo, it's Hook, of course, as well, over at that outfit. They'll play up against the OpTic boys. Surge have looked pretty good so far. Yes, they've played, look, they played Boston, they've played Thieves, 2 teams that also lost to FaZe that past weekend. So, you know, you don't really know how good those teams potentially are, but Surge definitely looked good. Even when Illy didn't have like a 1.7 in the second series, RCT stepped up, aBeZy stepped up, Hook looks very good. Their Search and Destroy will be very good. I mean, like with Illy on that team, Hook on that team, like their Search and Destroy is going to be very solid. So that's the interesting test to me. I think that OpTic beating Surge this weekend comes down to the Search. If they lose another couple of round 11s, they're not going to be happy about it. But I think that those Search and Destroys they play against Surge probably will go the distance in round count. And if that's true, then some of this clutch factor, some of this overextending at crucial moments will come into play. And if OpTic can win map 2, I think they win the series. They should win at least 2 of the 3 respawns they play. But if they lose map 2, and let's say it goes to game 5, then, you know, that's when the pressure's going to be on for them to prove. Because it's not like Carolina are too bad at Search either. They had that comeback against Vegas the other day with Gwyn making big plays. So it's going to be an interesting weekend. You just can't get away with having lackluster Search and Destroy. Maybe you can when you play Rocker, not a great respawn team. But I also think it's too early to say that their Search and Destroy is weak anyway, because they've taken everyone to round 11. They've just lost on all the occasions in very winnable situations. Now, I do want to mention that OpTic actually are 6th. So yesterday, for some reason, I took the graphic the CDL put out as gospel that OpTic were 8th. And afterwards, after I recorded it and after I edited it, I was like, surely OpTic can't be 8th, like as it sounds. And a few of you guys pointed out in the comments. So OpTic are actually 6th here because, as obviously, they have a 5-in-4 map count. It's better than Vegas, it's better than Ravens. So technically they're P6 right now in the standings. Not like it matters, it's all going to change anyway. But yeah, the CDL standings had them at 8th, I think, on the graphic they put out. So I shouldn't have trusted it. I don't know why I did. You guys know the drill. But very much interested in your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.